Hello. I just bought a Switch 2 in anticipation of the new Pokemon game.
Can you tell? I recorded this and wanted this out before ZA came out, knowing that if it wasn't, this video wouldn't be out until after I had my fill with that game.
But you know what I'm also a very big fan of? Neptunia. And I've heard that the Switch 2 makes Switch 1 games, even without a Switch 2 patch, just run better. So I'm wondering, how does Neptunia games run on Switch 2? There's the obvious example of the very infamous V2 port, but other Neptunia games ran pretty well on Switch, but there was a few hiccups here and there, so I'm personally wondering, does the Switch 2 iron those out? And does the Switch 2 make V2 real dang good or not? Let's find out.
Oh, and by the way, homemade V2 jump scare. Now, I'm sure everyone's wondering, how does V2 run? And that's why we're saving it for last. Gotta get that watch time up. Oh, hey, no, don't skip ahead. And so the first game we're going to be looking at is Super Neptunia RPG, the most underrated Neptunia game. Seriously, go play it now. It's so good. And this game is known for having long load times on Switch. And so looking at how long the game takes to load, we see the Switch 2 loads 2 seconds faster. Wow. Definitely worth that $450 upgrade. But okay, it actually gets more interesting, because loading in the game from the title screen, yes, it still has that strange pause when you select a profile, but it actually takes 7 seconds faster, which is pretty nice. No, but then the impression goes back down, and it's only an extra second when it comes to fast traveling. But then a little bit better, it takes 4 seconds to travel between areas. Now for battles, the first one you do when you load the game up still takes a while on Switch 2, 15 seconds, but it is actually down from the 19.5 seconds it takes on Switch 1. And yeah, that loading is only for the first battle. Second battle onwards is negligible. And now actually looking at a battle itself, I'll be honest, when I was playing this game for the footage, I didn't notice a difference. But now comparing the two, it genuinely does look like the Switch 2 version runs better, and the Switch 1 version has like more choppiness with all the all the effects going on, and the switching characters has a bit of lag, where in Switch 1 where Switch 2 doesn't. Like, I don't know. You know, maybe I'm on something, but for me, it definitely looks smoother on Switch 2. I don't know, what do you think? Is this a Switch 2 placebo effect, or is it actually is running better? Because again, when I was playing it for the footage, I did not notice any difference. Also, to bring up the menu, it loads nice 2 seconds faster for the characters loading in, and again, it seems a lot more choppy on Switch 1 than it is on Switch 2. It's like it's moving the characters on screen is a lot smoother on Switch 2 from comparing the footage side by side. But again, I didn't really notice it too much when I was, recording this footage. And one more thing to mention that I don't really know how to show is that when I went back to play this game to get the footage, on Switch 1, there's actually some input lag, it felt like. And I never noticed that before. That's probably because I played through the entire game on Switch 1, so I got used to it. But the second I jumped into the Switch 2 version, the movement felt a lot more immediately responsive. Whereas going back to Switch 1, because I then went back again to Switch 1 to test out what I had just felt, and yeah, genuinely, the Switch 1 version feels like there is input lag that the Switch 2 version fixes. Which is genuinely really interesting, because again, this game doesn't have any fancy Switch 2, Nintendo-approved patch. This is just plugged right into the Switch 2 with no updates. And it literally, runs better. Oh, no, not a surprise, but no input lag when there actually was some on Switch 1? Wild. So yeah, now especially that it runs relatively good on Switch 2, play Super Neptunia RPG now. After this video, of course, let's move on to Sisters v Sisters. And so booting into the game, you can see I didn't set a timer because, yeah, it's, the difference is negligible. They load it basically at the same time. But then actually loading into the game, it loads a noticeable 10 whole seconds faster. And when it comes to loading into a different area in the game, it is a nice 8-second difference. Now hopping into a battle, we can see that there really isn't a difference at all, and, that's because, well, I made a whole video on it, so you can go give that a watch, but the Switch port of Sisters v Sisters runs really dang well already, so literally all they needed to do was fix the load times on Switch 2, and yeah, that's what the Switch 2 does, it fixes the load times, and the game already ran well. Though actually, looking at Maho's 4-way beam attack animation, as you can see, it actually runs a bit smoother on Switch, whereas it's a tad choppy on Switch 1. And yeah, there was something I noticed that sometimes when there was a lot of stuff going on screen, like that fancy attack, it lagged a tad bit on Switch 1, but now it's nice and smooth on Switch 2, along with Maho's fancy special animation, which I can barely tell a difference looking at it, but it looks a tad smoother on Switch 2, so, I don't know, watch it again, watch it really closely, because, it looks like it's barely smoother, but I swear there's a little bit of a difference that I'm noticing. And with that, we can now move on to V2.
Hi, wait, there's 5 other Neptunia games on Switch. Why haven't you talked about those?
Well, here's the thing. I kind of, don't own any other Nep game on Switch. I mean, look, I've not exactly made a money here, if you can't tell from the homemade VTuber model. I'm not gonna go out and buy all these games I already have on other platforms just to test them out for one video that'll get only 5 views because there's only 5 Neptunia fans, including myself. So actually, there'll be only 4 views on the video. But look, Game Maker was clearly made on the Sisters v Sisters engine, and Sisters v Sisters runs fine, so Game Maker's probably runs fine too. For Nep Ninja, according to this Game Explain review, the game ran fine on Switch 1 other than the usual hiccups when there's a bunch of stuff on screen, so the Switch 2 probably irons that out and the game runs just fine. And for Neptunia Riders, do you really care how that one runs? Are you gonna buy it? Game seemed like it ran fine enough in Donkey's video. And then finally, there's the Rebirth Trilogy, which you can't get in the West because Nintendo won't! No. Look at some of the stuff on the eShop.
Double kill. Triple kill. Overkill. Kill-tacular.
Nintendo's just being really weird towards Idea Factory in particular for some unknown reason. And I mean, hey, not sponsored, but you can go to Play Asia right now and get the Rebirth Trilogy physically for Switch. Even has an English box art option, which is wild, and of course, English text and voice options in the game itself, so yeah, you can actually still get it. Alright, it's finally time. How does V2 run on Switch 2? Wait, actually, really quick, I should probably mention that all of the Nep games I've been playing have been played on a physical cartridge, and any updates or DLC have been downloaded directly to the system memory and not a separate SD card. Alright, V2. So firstly, booting into the game, the difference is negligible, so I didn't even include that footage. And then loading into an area in-game, it's just nothing too crazy, just a 4-second difference. But how does the game run? Well, I am very excited to say that V2 runs incredibly on the Switch 2. It is such a night and day difference. It's obvious when you're playing it, and it's obvious when you're looking at the footage in post. It's so clean. It's a nice, clean 60 FPS with nothing, with no jitters, no slowdown. It is wonderful being able to play this game like this. And the same can easily be said for the battles in-game. It all runs at a nice, smooth 60. The special attack animation is nice and smooth with no hiccups whatsoever. It's fantastic. And this is very exciting because Neptunia used to be a mostly mobile series on the Vita for the longest time, and that's when I also got into the series. So then now finally having the big console V2 in a nice, smooth, portable state, ooh, that's fantastic. And before any smart aleck goes, oh, the Steam Deck. And before any other smart alecks go, oh, just mod the Steam Deck so it can play V2. No. And even though it very clearly runs better on Switch 2, very obviously to the naked eye, I thought, let's do one of those frame analysis, of the footage stuff that you see on these kinds of videos. Okay, I know that V2 runs bad on Switch, but it doesn't run that bad. Yeah, so I guess I don't know what I'm doing with this. I followed the tutorial to the T, but seems I did something wrong. But here's the thing, this actually still kind of helps a little bit. Because you can see how bad and up and down it is. And then strangely, it actually hits exactly 60 FPS for 1 second when the screen freezes after the victory animation. And then moving over to the Switch 2, the numbers are noticeably higher for the most part, even though this is still very wrong, because trust me, playing this on Switch 2, it was not like, actually what the frame rate detector is saying, that it was back and forth, up and down. It was very smooth the entire time I played it on Switch 2. But still, the fact that even with this whole messed up frame rate analyzing thing that I did, we can still see the Switch 2 just has higher numbers, even with this. So, yeah, the Switch 2 port of V2, well, the Switch 1 version running on Switch 2, is absolutely fantastic, and a fantastic way to play the game. Well, other than the Million Arthur DLC being delisted before the Switch port even had a chance to exist. Seriously, that is so dumb. You can still get the original Tekken DLC, for example, on the PS3 store for Victory, however many years after Victory came out, and yet just a few years after V2 is out, Square Enix pulls the Million Arthur DLC because it was supposed to be a limited time thing. Nobody's heard of Million Arthur. That was free advertisement. That was the first time I'd heard of that series. I swear, that company is so much more stupid with their IP than Nintendo. But okay. But I think I know what's going on. It seems like V2 was made with an unlimited frame rate. So it could have hit at 60, but the console was never strong enough to do so, other than as we saw that brief moment after the victory screen. And now we have the Switch 2, and this game is easily hitting that 60 FPS that it always has wanted to hit. And now that kind of leaves an interesting question. So was the unlimited frame rate worth it then? Now that we have the Switch 2, in hindsight, we have a Switch 2 now, so now it runs great. But now a game like Sisters v Sisters, which had a fixed frame rate of 30 frames a second, so it was able to always hit 30 frames a second on Switch 1, but now on Switch 2, the load times are faster, but the performance isn't any better, and it's staying at that 30 because, it's locked at 30. So, yeah, the question is, was it worth it? Now that we have a bit of hindsight and a Switch 2? Or should they have stuck with V2 staying at 30, a locked 30 on Switch 1? I don't know. So, what do we learn today? Well, it seems like the Switch 2 runs Neptunia games fantastically, fixing bad load times and fixing poor performance. So that just leaves one question that I have on my mind, with the caveat of Nintendo stopping being weird towards Idea Factory, and there's no problems with any of the content, would I be comfortable making the Switch 2 my primary home of the inevitable Neptunia V, since they kind of hinted at that for the anniversary? And honestly, I think so. If there's no problems with excluding content, then yeah, I think I'll buy Neptunia 5 for the Switch 2. If a Switch 2 port comes out day one, of course. Wait a minute. Oh, Neptunia 5 on the Switch 2 is gonna be a game key card, isn't it?
Ugh. Brother, ugh. What's that?